We have questions on libertarianism, Whigs and Tories, and we have a lightning round on cities in the Midwest. Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu, now being broadcast and podcast on the Crusade Channel. Talk radio the way it should be at crusadechannel.com. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a Caledonian, Charles Coulombe.
Caledonian? Scots were hey, we want us bled?
Oh, yeah.
Scotland forever. The pride of the clans, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
The deep Scottish burr, the adventures of Sir William Wallace and King Robert the Bruce, Mary Queen of Scots, Bonnie Prince Charlie, Sir Walter Scott, Robert Burns, Robert Louis Stevenson. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. It could be. I mean, Ross McEwen would be proud of me right now.
Definitely. He's definitely smiling. I can see it right now.
And he's as Scots as they get, you know. He's a member of Clan McEwen. Although I myself belong to a clan society, I'll have you know.
What clan is that?
McKinnon.
Really? How does that work?
Well, it's something called heredity. If you've got an ancestor, then you're his descendant. That's how that works. Like, for instance, you know your parents, right?
Yeah, I know my parents.
Okay, well, you're their son.
Can confirm.
Okay, now you remember your grandparents.
Yes.
You're their grandson.
Yes.
Now, though you won't remember them, your great-grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on, you're the descendant of all of them. By virtue of being your parents' son, you're not one whit less than being your grandparents' grandson.
Go on.
Well, in just that way, I have a forebear, a several times great-grandfather, named Laughlin McKinnon, who, having fought at the Battle of Culloden for Bonnie Prince Charlie, came to Canada in 1772, and with his wife from the Isle of Egg, and settled in Quebec. And their daughter Geneviève married a French Canadian, and the results you see before you.
For some reason, I get the impression that when you state it like that, and in the Scottish context, that sort of goes way back, and there's a lot more. For example, like Franchini family reunion, it's only goes back to 3 generations, maybe.
Well, you'd have to go to Bari or Naples for a lot of Franchinis.
Right, but well, I guess so. I guess we could do that, but I mean, like, I picture sort of like an event, like, oh, the McKinnon clan, like this.
Well, they have an annual event that's quite large. In fact, I've not been to it, but let me see, when are we doing it next? There's a McKinnon Clan Association, of which I'm a member.
So it's an event where you might be part of Clan McKinnon, and it's so many people that you guys don't necessarily even know each other.
Oh, yeah, definitely not.
But there's sort of, I mean, is it just straight up honor code that, or is someone like checking your lineage?
They do check.
They do check? What is that like?
Check.
There's like a person that
it's they come and they take your blood, basically. I'm joking. They don't take your blood. All right, the Clan McKinnon Society is hosting a gathering I didn't go this year because I was graduating, but next year, it's Scotland 2024, June 18th to 21st. And I am definitely going to share that.
So, well, that's interesting too. So, like, what is the structure of this? Like, for example, who is the organizer? Is there sort of like a patriarch and matriarch figure?
Well, yes. Clan MacKinnon has a chieftainess. In the beginning, every clan, I mean, you got to go back to the beginnings of the clan system, and this worked in both Scotland and Ireland. It was a very Celtic thing. Basically, they're extended lineages, extended families. And in the pre-feudal days, and feudal days as well, they fought together against their various enemies. But the larger clans have many different branches, so sometimes they fought each other. And they were involved politically. The chief of the clan, the chief of the name, had a certain jurisdiction over all of his relations. In time, when the clan system broke down in Scotland after Culloden, there were various legal rights that were taken away from the chiefs. It became a purely honorary thing, and the chief of the clan of Clan MacKinnon is a lady who lives in England. She doesn't really take a very active role in things, but she appoints a delegate who supervises the clan society and so on.
How do you determine who's the chief? Is it some sort of
It's
same rules as monarchy or something?
but yeah, exactly, genealogy. And some
Okay, so
clans a woman can inherit, and others they can't. Just like the monarchies.
okay, so there's wow. How many clans are there?
Gosh, I have no idea. But that's a good question.
So I
Let's
mean like is
see.
it so prominent where if you're living in Scotland, you're just going to see clan events just from living in Scotland, or is this just like a dozen of them?
There are about 200 distinct clans. Now they have tartans, crest badges, mottos, etc. I mean, there are about 200, and let's see what they have to tell us about my own people, because I feel there's the McEwens. They're Ross, if you're listening. You don't have a chief. I'm sorry to hear that, but you have your crest is a trunk of an oak tree, sprouting proper, and the motto is Reveresco. I grow strong again. MacKinnon, on the other hand, the crest is a boar's head erased, and holding in its mouth the shank of a deer, all proper. The motto is Adentes Fortuna Juvat, which means fortune assists the daring. And the badge is either the pine, Scots fir, or St. John's wort, St. Columba's flower. And our chieftainess is Madam Ann MacKinnon of MacKinnon. So now you know.
Are there perhaps different levels of prestige between the clans? Like, are some clans more prominent than
sure.
others? And
Yeah.
are there? That's pretty cool. So, what about like? Do the clans ever interact, or is there some sort of competition? And
Oh yes.
whether so formal or informal?
There were feuds and everything else. I mean, it was very much a part of clan life, feuding.
Hashtag clan life.
Hashtag clan life. No, I mean, the probably the biggest, most powerful clan for a long time were the MacDonalds, who had big stretches of the Highlands and parts of the islands. But the Stuart clan were the ones who eventually contributed the royal family.
That the whole concept of clans to me is so cool. But
well, I can see why it would be. It's a little bit like families, in the sense of, back in the old neighborhood. I can see why this would strike you as extremely wonderful. Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to the mattresses against the McLeods. Yeah, I can see why you would find it very endearing. Man, we got these cool bagpipes. The March of the Franchini Man.
I didn't even know that was there underneath my interest. Wow. You caught me
Well,
off guard with that one.
think about it. I mean, it's really. I mean, not to draw too close a comparison, and as you're always telling me, loose lips sink ships. But the let's just say except that the clans were not criminal interests. Well, a few of them were. The McGregors went in for sheep stealing, but I can't really say anything too bad about them because they were allies of the McKinnons, and they claimed to be relations. So, because certain clans, a number of clans, all claim descent from the Irish king, now of the 9 hostages, and the McKinnons and the McGregors always claimed to be old, related far, far back. But at any rate, the McGregors had a reputation as sheep and cattle thieves. But probably these were lies made up by the Campbells. Nobody liked the Campbells, except people who ate soup.
Okay, I see what you did there. Okay, well done. Yeah, Campbell's soup. Okay.
Well, nobody ever heard of Colombo or Genovese soup, did they? I don't want to say crime families because that I think when you say crime family, you are either knowingly or unknowingly prolonging a stereotype. I think that certain families in the New York area of primarily Italian descent, not exclusively, primarily, should be seen more in the light of Scottish or Irish clans than as crime families. And you know what else? I think Bruce Cutler would agree with me.
Well, that's for sure.
Oh, we're going to persecute the Gaudis. Why don't we go after the O'Neills or the McDonald's? Why are we discriminating against Italian clans? You know, we got chiefs in Italian clans too. We call them Doms. You know, we call them Capi.
Oh man. But
you know, like the King of Scotland, he was like the couple to the Capi. You know what I'm saying?
But no, what I was saying, I don't know. Going through the Scottish clans, there's so many things that feel fulfilling from it that is sort of lacking. It's sort of kind of a structured cohesion, to the family unit. Whereas like with our reunions, it's like, well, yeah, I think I'll go. I don't really care. Oh, I'm just drifting away, and there's not really any pride there. It's sort of more based on personal relationships within the family, perhaps. Other things.
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, you've got to remember that the clan associations are relatively recent things because the clans were pretty much broken after Culloden in 1746. And the tartans were forbidden. In fact, most of the tartans that you see today, everyone says, the McKinnon tartan, the McDonald, whatever, they're probably not, except in a very few cases, they're probably not the ones that existed before 1745. They sort of created a lot of new ones starting in the 19th century. But what happened was that you had the massive settlement of Scots around the British Empire in the United States. You say you had them in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the United States, and also in places like Argentina, and a lot in France as well. One of the most active McKinnons in the society I know is a Frenchman. I mean, he's a McKinnon. His name is Maquinon, but he's French. And so in the last 40 or 50 years, maybe, these clan associations have sprung up because in the increasingly atomized world we live in, it becomes neat to be part of a larger family that's literally international and yet is actually related to you. Because, again, this goes back to the widespread. If you belong to a Scottish or an Irish clan, to a clan association, then you have distant relatives in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Britain, and you're not all atomized. You have a joint identity of sorts. It's sort of artificial in a way, but it's based on something that was quite real and quite historical. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And usually the other thing that these clan associations will do, well, there'll be several things. One is wherever the original strongholds of the clan were in Scotland, they very often will organize pilgrimages to go gawk at them. And you really have these Scottish games and sorts of things like that all over the United States and Australia and Canada and all that. And very often, any local clans that are represented will have tents there, and recruit other members of that clan, because you've got all sorts of people running around. I mean, my being a McKinnon is a very tenuous thing because my McKinnon ancestors many generations back, but it's something I'm very proud of, especially because he was probably one of the very last survivors of the Battle of Culloden. He died at the age of 110, which back in 1835 was no small thing.
That's unthinkable.
Well, I've seen his obituary, and they were quite amazed. They, as they said, he had reached the patriarchal age of 110.
That's amazing.
Huh?
I mean, even for simple things. I mean, like as you're 110. I mean, even for perhaps non-life-threatening things like you don't have blood pressure medicine. You don't have.
No, you don't have any of that stuff. He must have been one tough guy.
Surely. Wow.
I mean, you had people who lived that long, but usually they were, let's just say, everybody knew about it. Yeah. And we don't have, we call them super centenarians today. We don't have that many people who are 110 running around. We have a lot of people who are 101, but not 110.
Yeah. Well,
those last 10 years are tough.
Yeah.
And he survived Culloden, and he came across to Canada in 1772.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's just a genetic thing, really. It's like I think Elon Musk said something funny relating to this because they're showing the curve, the improvement in longevity, and the improvement was huge because it was age-based, and based on the advances in medicine, the dramatic difference is actually for the first few years of life, in relating to childbirth and taking care of children, where medical advances have greatly helped that area. But in terms of age, it's not as dramatic of an improvement.
No.
And he had this funny line. He said that it's wired into our DNA. If you're a fruit fly, it doesn't matter how much yoga and vegan stuff you eat. You're going to be dying at the same time. I thought that was a good line. I thought that was because
that's very true.
Yeah.
And no matter what we do, we're going to die, at a certain age.
Yeah.
The human being is programmed to take only so much.
Yeah.
I told you about the thing I saw on the internet. I thought it was very funny. and said, enjoy your 20s, 30s, and 40s, because in your 50s, the check engine lights are going to start coming out. And boy, is that the truth.
Yeah. Well, I better live it up for another 10 years or so.
And then you'll be in my position.
All right. All right. So that was a fun segment. We've got no memes today. What about book of the week?
I'm glad you asked that question. Are you ready for a strange one?
Always, Charles.
That's good to hear, because strange is what I got. No, today's book of the week is The Children of Green Knowe by Lucy Maria Boston.
How do you spell that?
The Children, is spelled T-H-E. Children is...
Okay, how do you spell green, though?
Green is one word, G-R-E-N-N, green. And then the last word is K-N-O-W-E, Green Knowe. The Children of Green Knowe by Lucy Maria Boston.
Oh, okay, got it.
This is a heartwarming ghost story.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. It's a children's book, actually. It is the adventures of an English kid just after World War II who is in a public school at Christmas time. His father and stepmother are living in Burma, and he's trapped at school for the holidays, or so he thinks. Instead, his unknown great-grandmother, his mother's grandmother, exists, and she summons him to spend Christmas with her at their hereditary home of Green Knowe. Well, he gets to Green Knowe all right, but he finds that all is not as it seems. And there he encounters the ghosts of three of his, I guess you would have to say they would have been cousins, aunts and uncles. And they are the children of Green Knowe. And there's a terrible, evil horror at Green Knowe as well, which they help him fight off.
Okay, it looks like this is a series.
It is. The Children of Green Knowe is the very, very first. There are 6 of them altogether.
Yeah, and it looks like they're written in the period from 1954, the first one, to 1976.
Yeah. And the 76 one I didn't read until many, many years later. The others were all written in the late in the 50s and early 60s.
Yeah.
And I read them when I was a kid. I really enjoyed them. But here is the funny thing. Much as I enjoyed them, what I didn't know was that Lucy Maria Boston, who wrote them, actually based them on her own house, the manor at Hemmingford Gray. And in the past 5 years that I've been here, I visited the manor 3 times. And it is exactly like in the books.
I was gonna say that makes sense. So it's creepy. I picture Disney's Haunted Mansion. No, okay.
It's to me it's a very welcoming house. The lady who owns it now is Lucy Maria Boston's daughter-in-law, Diana Boston. And I got to tell you, she's a wonderful lady, but because everything that's in the books is in the house, if you know the books, you got the weirdest feeling. Well, I put it there. I said it's like going to a great uncle's house you haven't been to in 50 years, and everything is just the same. It's very, very bizarre. But no, I found it very, very pleasant and welcoming and all that. She says people usually find it either that way or they can't wait to get out. But she happily reports that the vast majority enjoy being there.
Okay.
She says, which is good for her because she couldn't keep it going otherwise.
Hmm.
But at any rate, no. So I've become very fond of the real life. The difference, of course, is that in the books, it is, as in the books, one of the oldest continually inhabited houses in England, going all the way back to Norman times. Unlike the books, it has not been in the hands of the same family all that time. It's had many, many different owners.
Yeah, it seems to happen in these historical places. It seems to get complicated.
Yeah. But I do recommend the book highly, especially as we're getting closer and closer toward Christmas. The BBC version of The Children of Green Knowe is actually very well done. And there's a scene in the book which is, I didn't know before I saw the BBC thing on the internet. I didn't know how they were going to pull this off. But there's a scene where he and his great grandmother go to what they call midnight mass for Christmas. It's Anglican, so, but they go to it, and he sort of flits back and forth between the present and a Christmas service in the 1600s. And I thought, how are they going to manage that? Well, they did. They did a real good job.
Hmm. All right. Very good. All right. Time for the questions.
Okay.
And the first question is a lightning round
Oh.
from Will, who says, City Lightning Round, hi. As a native to the Midwest is a great place to visit and live. Will you have Charles say a sentence or two about each of these Midwestern towns? If he hasn't been to the one, can or will he say what he knows about them?
All
Yes,
right.
yes, I can have Charles do that.
All right. And it will do that.
And all right. Oh, number one, of course. Cincinnati, his hometown.
Oh. Yes, indeed. Cincinnati, Cincinnati chili, of course, comes from there, as we all know and are grateful for. Cincinnati is one of the older towns in Ohio, big river town, heavy German influence. Over the Rhine is the one of the German sections in Cincinnati.
That's it. This is lightning. We're keeping it lightning. We've got 15 of these.
Oh gosh, let's go.
Yeah. Dayton, Ohio.
The arcade.
Muncie, Indiana.
Wouldn't you like to be with all the kin? That's Kokomo. Muncie, Indiana, was the prototypical Midwestern town for a number of surveys of Midwestern towns. That's how it was supposed to be, the typical.
Wow. Peoria, Illinois.
Indians, Peoria Indians. And it's on a river. It's idyllic.
Traverse City, Michigan.
Cold. Very cold.
La Crosse, Wisconsin.
The Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Dutch. Czechs.
Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh, the unicameral legislature of the state of Nebraska, and a very fine bishop who is my friend, the late lamented Bishop Flavin.
Columbia, Missouri.
Not a lot to say, and I really haven't heard all that much about it.
St. Cloud, Minnesota.
Oh, I've been there. Rundown theatrical theater, and it's close to Collegeville in the Bizarre Monastery.
Bizarre?
Look up St. John's Collegeville. They had a beautiful, beautiful church, Boiron artwork and all that. And now it's the Welcome Center, and the church is this alien UFO thing.
Oh, okay. I don't know how to pronounce this. Eau Claire, Wisconsin?
Eau Claire. Yeah, Anglo-Catholics, big cathedral.
We actually get a lot of business from there. It seems like a healthy Catholic population. Anoka, Minnesota.
There were a lot of French Canadians that settled there in the 1800s.
Wichita, Kansas.
Criswell predicted it would become the capital of the United States.
Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
The gateway to Mount Rushmore.
And last but not least, Fargo, North Dakota.
Fargo. It's a Fargo is Fargo. I've been to Fargo. Nice town, we're kind of friendly people and some French Canadian Indian Métis living in the area.
Pronounce Minnesota like you're from Fargo.
Minnesota.
I don't know why I love that so much.
What do you like, you? I had a friend of mine, now deceased, of course, like so many of my friends, Paul Buggart, who's from New Ulm, Minnesota. But Paul, his O's were like that, and he couldn't hear it. So I got him to say Idaho, and I kept him repeating it until he heard it in his own ears. He heard the elongated O, and then he got oh. He died young. I don't know how he died. I don't know why he died. He was married with kids, but he vanished off the internet. And it was only this past year I found out he died when he was only 30.
Wow. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Okay, that's it.
All right.
All right, now for the proper questions. Question from Michael, who says, "Greetings, gentlemen. I recently watched The Last Hurrah with Spencer Tracy from 1958. Have either of you seen this film? I thought its portrayal of the WASP-Catholic clash of the era to be quite front and center for Hollywood, and was wondering if there are any others like it. If you haven't seen it, it's about a mayor seeking his 5th term in office, and for the first time ever faces a real challenge against a younger opponent." Ooh, I haven't seen this one.
I have. It's a great film. And of course, it's vaguely based on James Michael Curley, rather, in Boston. What you had in the Northeast, you had a lot of these Irish political machines. And obviously, the WASPs didn't particularly appreciate them. The WASPs accused the Irish of being dishonest and grafting, and the Irish accused the WASPs of being inefficient and stupid. So,
which one was Spencer Tracy? Wasn't he the Catholic?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mayor
I was gonna say
the name was Skeffington, I think.
Okay. That would have been weird if he was the WASP.
No.
All right. All right. Who are Charles's favorite missionaries?
Well, St. Francis Xavier, St. Junipero Serra, St. John Neumann, St. Boniface, St. Martin of Tours, St. Willibrord, St. Columban, of course.
He was a missionary? He was in a monastery?
He was, but they evangelized he went from Ireland to Scotland to France, to Brittany, to the major part of France, to Switzerland, to Italy, founding monasteries along the way. And every monastery he founded became a center of evangelization.
Wow. That's how you do it.
Yeah, it was pretty big that way. So Oh, and Padre Eusebio Kino, can't leave him out.
Where did he evangelize?
Sonora and southern Arizona, and Baja California.
Hmm.
Baja, or Baja, as you might call it. I hope you wouldn't call it Baja.
Yeah. I was really fascinated with Junipero Serra, and still am. And finally, published the Catholic World has finally published a bunch of good books on his life, which I highly recommend. But you know who I've really wanted to delve into is so mysterious that I never. I don't know. Are there books out on him?
Who?
Is Saint Francis Xavier?
Yeah,
Y-
there's a particularly bad book by a Jesuit named Broderick.
I don't want to. I don't want a bad book by a Jesuit, Charles.
He
I
was a
don't.
Jesuit,
Ah, gotcha.
which is why. But Broderick obviously disliked him, and he attacked him constantly for being mean to the heathen.
That's so pathetic that the only motivation in this entire world for a book on Saint Francis Xavier is born out of hatred.
Well, he's a pathetic Jesuit.
Anyhow, if anyone has any book recommendations for Saint Francis Xavier, I'm really, really interested. I just haven't seen any out there.
I haven't either.
I guess there's not a lot of.
Well, see, he was bad because he evangelized a lot of people, and he told them that they had to become Catholic or they go to hell, and it was bad.
Because I personally had the impression that, in terms of sheer numbers, I thought he's the guy.
Well, yes, he is, but it doesn't matter because see that he was rigid.
So it's like how do you do that? Like in the sheer volume, because
Vinny, in today's church, you know that the measure of anything, if it's successful, it's wrong.
right, I know quality over quantity.
Well, no, not that either. If it's quality, it's bad, and if it's quantity, it's bad.
No,
Basically, you want crap that doesn't work. Look at what the Holy Father said. Whenever I read about an order that's getting a lot of vocations or a diocese that's bringing a lot of converts, I worry that there's rigidity.
because the big question on my mind, the question that's so interesting is, I guess, what
Why are modern Jesuits losers? Or
No, I get off the Jesuits. I'm not interested in Jesuits. I know you got triggered hard by that Broderick person, but no, so when you want someone to convert, you go to work on it, and you represent, and you live a good life, and you pray for the person, and if you're lucky, maybe you planted some seed that might germinate, and then who knows if it ever happens, right? But that's a lot of work, and that's a lot, like per person, on a per person basis. That's kind of a lot. And so
what you do is you tell them you're a good person and you're perfect right where you are.
but see, what's amazing to me is how do you just bottle it? You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, okay, you know what? Today, gonna baptize 2,000 people. Like, what did you do to
what he did? He had a lot of supernatural gifts, for one thing. He was very holy.
Of course. I mean,
he was extremely holy,
yeah.
And he was very. When I say he was extremely persuasive, I mean there's no end to that particular phrase here. He was exceedingly persuasive, but in ways, I mean, he had the gift of tongues, literally. So he would speak to multinational groups who didn't speak one another's languages, and they all understood him. And that by itself was something that would get people's notice, believe me. But also, what he said was so fervent and so true and so pure that anybody with the slightest bit of goodwill was attracted. And mind you, I have known of priests who preach not quite like that, to that degree, but I mean, you may remember the late great Norman Robinson,
Okay.
who was one of the founding people of Catholic Treasures. He was an Englishman, he hears a Catholic priest, oddly enough a Jesuit, preaching the faith in Liverpool in 1928 at a big open air thing. And from what that priest said and did, he wanted to become a Catholic immediately.
What did that priest say?
He told the crowd that we're all fallen, we're all destined to hell by virtue of being human beings, sons of Adam and daughters of Eve, and that Christ established a way out of that trap, which is the church and the sacraments. And if you wanted, more assurance of your eternal soul than you have now, you really ought to take advantage of it.
I just can't help but be a little bit cynical whether or not there's fertile soil for that, or if the soil is as fertile for that in
Oh,
America.
there's fertile soil for that. I mean, if we stop talking at cross purposes with ourselves and we're fervent, I mean, what do the churches, the great missionaries always preach that. Pope Benedict XVI has said that this is what they preach, and this is why they made so many converts. It's not rocket science. Either the church is essential or it isn't. If it's not, then, excuse me, I've got a life to lead. If it is, then I better join up.
It's interesting.
Now, if I'm told I don't need the church, then I don't need the priests, and I don't need the Pope. And that, for some people, would be much better, because they'd never have to listen to any of these people ever again. Wouldn't that be nice? They wouldn't have to care. Whatever opened out of their little mouthlets, it wouldn't matter. I mean, how much attention do you pay to the Grand Rabbi of Israel?
Zero.
How about the moderator of the Church of Scotland?
The moderator? Zero.
What about the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Zero. I saw him at the coronation, though.
Yeah, but how much attention do you pay to what he has to say to you religiously?
Zero.
Okay, well, what about the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem?
I don't know him, but I'm open.
He's the head of well, that's I guess that's progress of a sort. I don't know what kind. But no, I mean, that is basically when they say you don't need us, you're fine where you are. Then great. I don't need you. I'm fine where I am. Go away. Why are you bothering me?
I guess I just perhaps feel like what needs to precede that, or at least to me, I'm probably wrong, but just from a normal guy in the crowd standpoint, that in order to be able to say that, in order for it to land, you need rapport.
Well, yeah, you do need rapport, and the missionary has to really love those he wants to evangelize. I mean, they have to be important to him. But fortunately, we know, as we found out in COVID time, we don't need the sacraments. All we need is to donate.
Yes. All right. Next question. Will the Ohioan says, "Hi, will Charles give a brief history of the House of Commons in England, such as its background and development into what it is today?"
Lousy. Well, sure. It developed over the course of the Middle Ages, basically. The House of Lords is the oldest part of Parliament, and it owes its beginning to the Curia Regis, the King's Council, where he would gather the bishops and barons and abbots of the realm to advise him on different things. Then in the 1200s, I think, so they added to that the great landowners or their representatives in the different counties, the so-called Knights of the Shire, and then the different boroughs demanded representation. So the House of Lords emerged from the nobility of the abbots and bishops, and the House of Commons from the coming together of the Knights of the Shire and the representatives of the boroughs. And that distinction you've got to this day. I mean, they say Knights of the Shire kind of as a poetic thing, and amusedly, but you have representatives in the rural districts and then the representatives of the towns. And the representation was fixed at some point in the Middle Ages. I forget when. When life went on, you had the Protestant revolt, and then you had at which point, after Henry VIII suppressed the monasteries, the abbots left the House of Lords. So you just had Anglican bishops and the nobility and the lords. But in the Commons, the boroughs that had been represented in the Middle Ages continued to be represented, even if they no longer had any population. Contrariwise, and these places like Old Sarum and Gatton might not have anybody living there. So the landowner that owned the property chose who represented the borough in Parliament, and these came to be called rotten boroughs. Contrariwise, places like Birmingham or Sunderland that grew up after the boroughs had been fixed, they weren't represented at all. So to try to redress this, you had the Reform Act of 1832, which got disenfranchised a great many of the rotten boroughs. Oh, I forgot to mention, sorry. In 1707, you had the Union of Parliaments with Scotland. And that, you already had the Union of Crowns when James the Sixth of Scotland became James the First of England when Elizabeth died. That was called the Union of Crowns. But in 1707, you had the Union of Parliaments. And that meant that Scottish, rather than going to the Scots Parliament, Scottish MPs would be elected for the House of Commons and representative Scottish peers for the House of Lords. Well, in 1802, you had the union with Ireland, and Ireland became part of the United Kingdom, which went from being the United Kingdom of Great Britain to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. So the Irish House of Commons and Lords were abolished. There were representative lords elected for the Irish peerage, and then the boroughs and all that were formed in Ireland, and their members sent to London, Westminster. So, starting then in 1832, there began agitation because there were property requirements and things like that to vote for MPs. But then in the 1860s, Disraeli went along with the idea of universal suffrage, and that was brought in. And originally, of course, the Commons and the Lords had equal power, but slowly but surely, as time went on, the Lords stopped proposing bills, so bills would only be initiated in the Commons. And then eventually, the Lords stopped voting against budgetary acts. They could, but they didn't. And that was the case until 1909, when the Liberal Party wanted both the Irish Home Rule Act and what was called the People's Budget. So the House of Lords refused to accept it. And what's his name? Asquith asked the king to call for new elections, which he did. The new elections would put them basically where they've been before. Neither party gained much or lost much. So the Lords would not budge. They wouldn't pass the budget and they wouldn't pass the Home Rule Bill. So Asquith asked the king to make a bunch of new lords to basically pack the house so that he could get them to vote the way he wanted them to. Well, the king refused, but then the king died. And they came up with this reform of the House of Lords in 1911, which a number of people fought both in the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Basically, what it did was it broke the House of Lords. It took away from them the right to vote on money bills at all. And for other bills, they could only delay for up to 2 years. They couldn't quash a bill. They could just delay it. So that later on, I think in the 40s, was reduced to 1 year, which is what it is now. And then, so the Commons is getting, well, we're not rid of the Commons, but the politicians that control the Commons continue to get stronger and stronger at the expense of the Lords and the monarchy. In 1963, they had the Life Peerage Act, which meant that from now on, peers would only be appointed for life rather than hereditary. And then under Tony Shoot Me Now Because I'm a Piece of Garbage, Blair, they got rid of most of the hereditary lords. And that's where we are today.
Okay. It's you don't. So I'm taking you don't like Tony Blair.
What, the piece of crap?
He's Catholic.
Yeah, I know. So's Joe Biden. What do you want me to do about that?
Whoa. Same sentence? That's what we're gonna do?
Yeah, it's a Kennedy Catholic.
Wait, who's a Kennedy Catholic?
What's his face? Blair.
I thought he just converted in like 2000 or something like that.
Yeah, I know, but it doesn't mean anything. He was as pro-abortion as Biden. He's a piece of garbage. He's a huge piece of garbage. And the damage he did to the British Constitution while he was Prime Minister was horrific. He's a piece of trash.
All right.
What's wrong with that? He's a little stupid garbage man. He is a garbage person.
He's a garbage.
Tony Blair is a garbage person. You know, he talked about cool Britannia. Well, in my ears, it sounded like fool Britannia.
I'll never forget. I watched on C-SPAN. He debated an atheist, and the prompt was whether or not religion is a force for good in the world. And he actually got utterly destroyed.
Of course he did. He's a moron.
Because his liberal positioning sucked. Like he didn't have a foot to stand on. I thought, wow, this is why everyone's falling away, because your argument sucks. And if that's the reason, we're in a bad way.
Well, we are, because that's the kind of Catholic in public life that is favored today by the Holy See. The Nancy Pelosi's and the President Biden's. The Kennedy Catholics.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a question. Interesting name. Vic Purr of Christ. And purr as in like purr, like as in a cat purrs. And he had an avatar on Patreon that is what you would expect from such a name.
A cat with a tiara.
Something like that.
That'd be an English pub, you know, the Cat and Tiara.
Anyhow, thank you for the question. First question from him or her. Dear Vincent and Charles, hello. I recently started reading Liberty, the God That Failed. Available on Tumblr House Bookstore.
That's by Hans Hermann Hoppe.
What?
Hans Hermann Hoppe. He wrote
that's
Liberty, the God That Failed. Yeah.
I thought that was by Christopher Ferrara.
Oh, well, maybe it is. I could be wrong. All right.
let me check the Tumblr House bookstore. Liberty, the God That Failed, $29.95, Angelico Press, by Christopher A. Ferrara.
All right. I don't know what I'm talking about. Go ahead. Won't be the first time.
Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, good selling book, by the way. It's on my to read list for sure. It's right up. I feel like the Off the Menu crowd, right up our alley.
Excellent.
So anyhow, he says I recently started reading that, and I was wondering if Charles could elaborate on the Whig versus Tory divide in colonial America. How strong were both during the Revolution? Is there a Tory tradition or group in the U.S. to this day? As well as that, are there any books on Toryism in the colonies and the United States that Charles recommends? Thank you both for the amazing podcast. God bless you both.
Well, okay. Firstly, we've got to remember where Whig and Tory came from in the first place. In the beginning, well, in the beginning, the Whigs were the supporters of. Well, actually, it goes back to the English Civil War, where the supporters of the king were the Cavaliers.
I was laughing because when you said in the beginning, I thought of Genesis.
Well, that too.
We have to go back. Okay.
We have to go back to all the way to Genesis. No, we have to go back to the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, and the supporters of Charles I, the Cavaliers, the people like that, opposed Oliver Cromwell and his Roundheads. Now, as you know, initially they won, they murdered the king, but then there was the Restoration. Charles II comes in. And this is where you begin to have the division into Whigs and Tories. The Whigs wanted to limit the monarchy and ultimately supported bringing over Dutch William in the Revolution of 1688. The Tories supported the Stuarts and the traditional monarchy. Now, they, after 50, 70 years, after 1688, many of the Tories, they supported the Hanoverians, but they wanted a traditional monarchy more or less in England, if that makes sense. And they opposed the Whig oligarchy that had controlled the country. Now, in America, it was a little more complex in that there were very few Jacobites, and most people who were considered Tories supported the Revolution of 1688. And that would be kind of an Achilles heel for them when the attempt to break on the part of the upper classes in America happened, because they shared many of the same ideas. It's just that the revolutionaries were more thorough, more logical, if you will. But there were a number of reasons for the divisions beyond just philosophy, beyond ideology. According to John Adams, a third of the people wanted independence, a third opposed it, and a third were neutral, didn't care. Now, he was hardly likely to exaggerate in favor of the Loyalists, but even by his estimation, 2/3 were not interested in independence. Conservatives with a small c, leave us alone. The system's working. You people are the troublemakers, and you're the people who are already pretty much in power. The four wealthiest men in the colonies in 1776 were George Washington, John Hancock, Philip Schuyler, and Charles Carroll of Carrollton. And the revolutionary leadership came from the people who, for the most part, already dominated the colonial assemblies. So in many cases, the Loyalists were their political opponents on the colonial level. Or to put this another way, let's pretend you've got a system where both Republicans and Democrats support the Constitution. But then a time comes when one of the other party begins to attack it. Well, the opposition, already used to opposing them, stay loyal to the Constitution as much out of opposition to the other party as their loyalty to the Constitution. You see what I mean? So a lot of the loyalists, the Tories, were recruited from the opposing factions in the different colonial assemblies. But there were others. I mean, there were placeholders who'd taken oaths to the king and didn't feel they could break them. One of the things that also becomes apparent is the how do I put it? The social and cultural dimension of loyalism. Very often, members of cultural and religious and ethnic minorities in a given colony would be loyalist, whereas members of the more mainstream tended to be rebel, which makes sense because they were connected to the leadership in a way that the others were not. So, for instance, in New England, although there were some real exceptions either way, as there are in any civil war, two of the biggest loyalist spokesmen in Massachusetts were actually Congregationalist ministers. But most of the Congregationalists, Calvinists, sided with the Revolution the way most of the Anglicans were loyalists in New England. They were a minority. But in the South, where the Church of England was established, the Anglicans tended to be rebel. And the Presbyterians, Calvinists like the Congregationalists up north, tended to be loyal. In New York, where the Dutch were dominant, the more assimilated and anglicized people were, the more they tended to be rebels. But the more unassimilated, the more Dutch they were, the more they tended to stay loyal. With Catholics, the division tended to be on financial lines, with richer Catholics siding with the rebels and poorer ones siding with the loyalists. So ideological loyalism, ideological Toryism did not, it wasn't that much of a deal. I mean, there were people like, there were a number of ministers, for instance, especially Anglican ministers, who argued against the revolution from the Bible and things like that. But by and large, and we had some other writers, but it was not quite as eloquent as it would become. I say as it would become because when the revolution was over, a lot of the loyalists moved to Canada, to Ontario, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. And there you had the beginning of Canadian conservatism, which was much more like British. You know, they accepted the monarchy. Quite the contrary, they made the monarchy the center of everything for their beliefs. Whereas in America, the loyalists who didn't leave, like the family of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton and her husband, basically kind of kept quiet and, you know, tried to forget what they had been. But in Canada, you had the descendants of the Loyalists form the Family Compact in Ontario and things like that. And then out of that tradition came people like George Grant, John Farthing, and so on. In the United States, a Tory tradition as such has not really existed as a major political thing. There have been individuals who you might claim as Tories. There's a writer I recommend highly named Michael Connolly, and he's written a lot about these kinds of American Tories. He just wrote a book about the neo-Jacobite revival in England and America in the 1890s, which is fascinating. I read it myself a little while ago. But by and large, Canada has the Tory tradition in North America, and we don't. But there's a book by that title, The High Tory Tradition in North America. I know the author, and I can't think of his name, which is annoying. North American High Tory Tradition by Ron Dart. That's he. You can get that from Amazon. It's well worth reading. And And there's a review of it by Christopher Morrissey in The Imaginative Conservative, The High Tory Tradition, An Alternative Future for America, ? You see, like British conservatives who have to justify the revolt of 1688, American conservatives like Russell Kirk and people like that had to justify themselves in terms of both 1688 and 1776, which is hard to do.
All right. Final question for today from John. He says, are liberalism and communism simply Christian heresies?
That's a good question. You could see it that way in a sense, in the same sense that Islam is. That is to say, if you define Christianity very broadly, they're heresies in that they see salvation as being this worldly and primarily through economics.
That's interesting.
And they see man basically as an economic unit within a soul. So the difference is the liberal traditionally wanted the wealthy to benefit from that, whereas Karl Marx and those guys wanted the proletariat to benefit. But it's the same understanding of man, God, and the state.
It's interesting the way you put it. It just opened up just a thought, because reading Solange Hertz, we obviously published like six or so of her books. I think one of the things that she said is there are two conspiracies in history, and those who conspire with God knowingly, and those who conspire with Satan either knowingly or unknowingly. And I think one of the things that she said in terms of the groups, one of the characteristics is the concept of utopia. Like, and you kind of said salvation. Like, what is the salvation of mankind? No. Salvation of mankind is in this world. It's this utopic vision based on, as you say, economics, right?
No.
Economics. But we know as Catholics that that's not salvation, actually.
No, and even in this world, it tends to wreck everything.
Exactly.
Because, all right, what do we touched earlier on the City Beautiful. What does the pursuit of beauty in culture come from? Ultimately, it's religious.
Yeah.
And of course, what are good politics about? Good politics are really about defending and promoting good culture. But what's good culture about? Well, basically, it's about promoting, defending, and encompassing, incarnating good religion. So politics are basically the outermost shell of the thing. Economics, of course, seen rightly, are the means whereby the whole machinery is kept going. But the liberal and communist approach is a little bit like saying, all you really need to do is keep your car in good order. Well, no, there's a lot more to it than that. There's traveling, there's why you're traveling, there's when you're traveling, there's how you feel about traveling, how you feel about driving. And notice, on the one hand, none of this stuff directly affects the ability to drive the car. But on the other hand, without them, there's no point to having a car you can drive. If I tell you, what I really want to do is drive up the coast through Big Sur to Carmel in San Francisco and really have a good time, driving up that way. well, then there's a reason for you to keep the car in good repair. But if you're just going to sit with it in the garage, it's not an end in itself, you see.
Mm.
And that's the problem. I mean, the critique has often been made of a lot of things like distributism and so on, that a lot of people who follow them they're not economists, they don't take economics into consideration. Well, that's true, and they should, because like keeping the car repaired, it is useful as a means to an end. But when it becomes the end, and that's all there is in your estimation, that's where you're just wrong.
Mm. Okay, I do have one last question. I kind of mixed up the questions here. But last question for the episode from John. He says, what are Charles's thoughts on Ayn Rand and libertarianism?
Not much. Ayn Rand was, frankly, I find her views repellent. It's all about the self, and it was Hobbesian state of nature stuff. Everyone's supposed to be out for themselves, and if you're altruistic at all, you're a schmuck. And there's no such thing really anyway.
So it's like self-interest. Everyone's acting in self-interest in that. Okay.
Which is chilling. I mean, it's not entirely true. It's not entirely untrue. Mutatis mutandis, I'm reminded of Adam Smith, who claimed that people would always act out of enlightened self-interest. But that's not true. People are likely to shoot themselves in the foot than do themselves any good.
Well, I mean, doesn't that govern the invisible hand of the market?
Well, the invisible hand of the market only works to a degree. And of course, it's values neutral. So the invisible hand of the market forces women out of the home and into the workplace.
Touche.
No.
So, what is the connection between Ayn Rand and libertarianism?
Well, libertarians believe that there should be a minimum of government, that the individual should be sovereign and allowed to do whatever he likes, with a minimum of interest, let alone interference, by his government. And that government in and of itself should have no particular moral or cultural or religious stand. And that basically government is a negative thing, not a positive thing.
That's interesting. So, I
would say it can be. Government can be a negative thing when it's based on the wrong principles.
So, I don't really know much about libertarianism. I've never been that interested. I'm going to speak on just based on my impression of it. So, obviously, it seems like it's relaxed. It's small government, and at least I have gotten the sense where it almost seems like some things you can shift pieces around and do what you want. Like, can you reconcile a libertarian government with Catholic teachings and principles?
Well, see, that's the argument. That's the crux of the problem, say, between the integralists and the libertarians. The integralists would say, the libertarians would say there's no such thing as a common good. And if, as the Catholic integralists would like to do, you can't impose the faith as the common good.
Libertarians would say there's no such thing as a common good?
Well, which takes us back to Ayn Rand. And that's why he put us into because she didn't believe in the common good.
That doesn't even make any sense because, wow, okay, that's very interesting. So what about public goods? Like, they teach this in Economics 101, right? The concept of, I think it's public or national goods, I forget. But it's goods which an entire society enjoys. For example, national defense, having some sort of military protection to protect a country is something everyone enjoys. And couldn't that, to some extent, be providing for the common good?
Well, it could be, and of course, there are libertarians who say they believe in the common good, but they don't believe in it the way the integralists do. They would say that the common good is simply the libertarians would say the common good is simply the very basic, you and I aren't shooting each other.
I'm just so taken aback and confused because I felt like every form of ideology has some concept of a common good.
They do, but they differ on what it is.
Exactly. But you're saying libertarianism straight up doesn't
A lot
say
of them don't.
they don't. Did
lot of
Ayn
them
Rand
don't.
say there is no common good? I mean, based off what she
She,
wrote?
well, I guess she would have said that the common good is the ability of anybody who can to grab what he can.
I see. So through the collective self-interest, I guess you could say, the common good is achieved, whatever that is.
Whatever that is. Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever that may be. The common good, however you conceive it to be.
It's pretty weird.
She was a pretty weird lady.
Okay, wow, that was really educational on libertarianism. Thank you for that, Charles. That really, I feel like it got to the core of libertarianism.
Well, maybe. I mean, I'm sure a lot of very fine libertarians would disagree with me and say that I'm distorting it. So I'd be happy to entertain anyone that wants to come up with some arguments against what I've said. Maybe they're right.
All right, that's it for this episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. It was a really good one. So any closing words, Charles?
Yeah, I've thought of becoming a life coach.
There's a lot of money in that racket.
A movement motivator.
Movement motivator? I haven't heard of that one. I like how it's like any movement. Like,
well, see what I'm doing right
like
now?
your first sale for literally any.
I'm running right now.
Oh, you're running. Oh, like physical movement.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that a physical trainer? I feel like
keep going.
You want to be a physical trainer? You want to be like at a gym?
No, I want to do it online so they can't see that I'm not actually doing anything.
That was such a strange image. I couldn't. Gosh, that's such a weird image of you as like a gym trainer.
Yeah, but I'd be like this, you see, so you couldn't tell. Like, yeah, you got to keep up. You got to keep doing it. Don't weaken, ladies and gentlemen. See, now you can't really tell that I'm just sitting here in my chair, not really doing anything.
So you're manipulating everybody. So I think I get what you're saying. So you're in the television. Everybody else is doing the exercise in person, but you're scamming us.
Yeah.
You're not with us. You're not in the trenches with us doing the workout. You're just making money.
Yeah, exactly. If you're paying me, then I'm with you.
That's very you. That's very on brand. It's very on brand for Tumblr House too.
Yeah, I was gonna say very, very, very on brand for Clan Franchini.
Yeah.
The gathering of the clans, the Gambinos, the Genoveses, the Colombos.
Oh, man.
Those are some Italian games you don't want to go to. The Franchini tent and the Italian games.
We've done that. We played some bocce ball. It's pretty
bocce
simple.
Ball. I was thinking of something else. Instead of tossing the caber, right, it's firing the submachine gun.
Wow. That's a little over the top, don't you think, Charles? I mean,
well, it's you have sort of ethnic games that you play.
Yeah.
Oh, and how about interrogating the stoolie?
Well, that's fun.
What did you tell the cops, or what did you tell them? I didn't tell them anything, boss, I swear. You want to stick with that, or you got another story for me? No, boss. Interrogating the stoolie. That was an old one.
All right, that's gonna do it for this episode. I got one question. I got two questions for you, Charles.
Oh, what are they?
What is it if it's Monday?
Please, I work best without the net. It's off the menu.
What about the soul you save?
It may well be your own.
See you next time, everyone.
God bless all. Be good, and remember, when the clans gather, make sure they're tossing the caber and not the stoolie.